Good evening, ladies, and welcome to Helping Hand's 6th Annual Women's Initiative. We're so grateful that you chose to spend your evening with us. And we want to say thank you to your hosts for creating a space to pause from the busyness of life, to connect with one another, and to be encouraged. Tonight you'll hear a story that is deeply personal and profoundly hopeful. Shelly Ivins, a beloved community member and a long-term volunteer at Helping Hands, will share her and her husband's journey marked by love, service, sudden change, and unwavering faith. She'll speak honestly about when roles shift and seasons suddenly change and things go nothing like you had planned. Through it all, she'll remind us of how God shows up through people, through community, and moments both big and small. As you listen, we invite you to lean in and reflect on your own story. Where have things suddenly changed for you? Where has your faith been tested? And where has hope shown up quietly? Because even when everything changes, but God.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Shelly Ivins, and my story goes all the way back to 1986. I was in high school. There was a football game, Bluffton High School football game. It was raining so much, but not lightning, so the football team kept playing, but the band got sent home early. And so many of us who were underclassmen, didn't have our licenses at the time, piled into the back of the upperclassmen's cars and decided to head to Dairy Queen. Dairy Queen was our first date because on the way to Dairy Queen, this guy that I had had my eye on, the guy, reached over, grabbed my hand as we were driving, and that was it, September 26th. 6 years later, September 26th just happened to be on a Friday night. We were engaged and chose that Friday night to be married. Now, fast forward all these years, September 26th this year will be our 34th wedding anniversary, but if you want to count all the years, it's 40. Within a few years of our wedding, we started our family, we started our careers, and like all families, time just flies. Before we knew it, we were grandparents. So now let's get into the next part of my story. It's the scary part. Last March, I was noticing things weren't right with Corey. He had been having headaches for about 8 weeks. I was just really on him. Buddy, you have got to go to the doctor. We've got to figure out what's going on. And finally he did. But the family practice doctor just wasn't getting to the bottom of it. His blood work was perfect. His lab reports were perfect. I don't know how his blood work came back perfect because on March 7th, he had a hand tremor. He still had a headache, the headache that he'd had for about 8 weeks, and he couldn't remember our phone number. He didn't know our address. He didn't know our email address. And things really spiraled very quickly. That night I didn't sleep at all. I just prayed all night long. God, what do I do? Something's very, very wrong here. The next morning, I basically told Corey, I quit asking. I said, but we're going to the emergency room. After much persuasion, I finally got Corey in the car. We went to the emergency room at Lutheran Hospital. They took us very, very seriously, and we're getting ready to take him back to an emergency room right away. And as we walked back, they turned us back around, took us back to the lobby. It was so busy that day, there were no rooms. They said, we'll be right back to get you. They came back just 2 or 3 minutes later and said, okay, all right, we've got a room for you. The only room they had was a pediatric room. My husband is 6'3". The bed was too short. The walls were bright yellow. There was a big elephant painting on the wall, and we will never forget that room. Things went very, very quickly for us after that. We gave the doctor the background, told him the headaches that Corey had been having, and he had an MRI of his brain. He had a full body MRI. It was shortly after that the doctor came and talked to us and told us the news. You know, we have found something. We don't know what it is yet, but we found something, and it does look like a mass. Things went 0 to 60 after that, very, very quickly. At that point, we knew we were being admitted, we knew we were going to the ICU, and we had to call our kids. Those were some of the hardest calls to make. After I called the kids, it was time to take Corey up to his room. So we get up to ICU that night, and Corey was very stable. At the time, things were really surreal, like this is really happening. He didn't seem like there was anything wrong in his brain. We were chatty, we were talkative. Family came and visited, guys from church came and visited him, and I was quite worried because the ICU is a quiet place. But our room was full of chatter and full of laughter, and everyone just was pouring their love into us. And I talked to one of the doctors that night. I was like, I'm really sorry that things are so noisy in here. And he told me, that's fine. Corey's gonna need that in the upcoming days. He knew where we were about to go even before we did. We told the rest of the family between Saturday and Sunday that Corey was going to have brain surgery on Monday, which would have been March 10th. Corey had a 3-hour brain surgery. After the brain surgery, the doctor came out and talked to me and let me know that things just went wonderful. And 3 days later, he came home from the hospital. Corey's diagnosis is called glioblastoma multiforme, GBM. His is glioblastoma multiforme wild type, methylated, and there are a couple of other add-ons that you can add on to that diagnosis, most of which I don't know how to pronounce, and I don't know what they mean. But glioblastoma was enough to scare us. So on March 13th, I brought Corey home from the hospital, and that day was exceptionally difficult. It was a difficult season because I went from being cared for to being the caregiver. Being the caregiver of a cancer patient who also has brain trauma, who also has stroke symptoms, and can't do anything else, can't do anything for himself at that point. So in the early weeks after bringing Corey home, not only was I instructed to watch for stroke symptoms, because he was very prone to have a stroke at that point, I was to look for seizures because they were likely. So I'm taking care of all of his medical and physical needs for him, but he also can't do the things that came so natural to him. Corey's always been our bill payer. Corey's always done all the taxes. All of a sudden, all those roles were thrown on top of me, on top of, the trauma of finding out that glioblastoma is terminal brain cancer. So the weight of navigating, gosh, my husband has deadly cancer, on top of, I've got to figure out how to get him on disability. I've got to figure out how to get the bills paid. I've got to figure out how to do taxes. I've got to figure out everything. Some days the weight of the paperwork was more difficult than the tumor itself. That was such a weird time because I didn't know how long it would last. I didn't know if he would ever get his capacities back. One of the biggest changes for us that was very difficult in the beginning was transitioning from being caregivers to care receivers. Corey and I have always just naturally cared for others, whether it's family or friends. All of a sudden, we're in a position where we had to receive care, and care we did receive. The care we've received from this community has just been absolutely phenomenal. Meals were brought to us, chores were done at the house. We didn't have to lift a finger for a while. This community just simply wrapped their arms around us. Even the dentist office made a care package for us. One of our roles as caregivers in the community has been with Helping Hands. In 2013, I was able to go on a mission trip with Forgotten Children to a couple of African countries. When we returned from that, one of my prayers with God was just, what's next? What do you have next for us after showing me the needs that I saw in Africa? And God was very specific. There are plenty of children in Wells County who need to be loved on. And the idea of foster care popped into my mind. Over a period of about 4 years, we fostered 25 kids in our home, and that is the ultimate caregiving. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in your home. We just loved on those kids. But it was a season, and we just felt God calling us to Helping Hands, because in reaching out to the kids, we always felt like there was a missing piece to the kids' parents. How can we love on the parents of kids from hard places? And Helping Hands was just a natural for us. And so since about 2017, we've been going to all of the Tuesday night groups from Helping Hands. And I tell you what, these folks are not clients. They are our friends. We love doing life with them. We just admire the parents so much. I primarily hang out with the women. Corey hangs out with the men, and we have made lifelong friendships. But again, our role as caregiver got flipped around last year. And now the Helping Hands community is able to reach out to us. The Helping Hands employees have reached out to us. The men and women that we work with on Tuesday nights have told us they're praying for us. They check in on us and have just loved us over the last year. So our season with Helping Hands looks very different now. We can't go as often as we used to. Seasons are like that. Sometimes the baton needs to be passed from one person to the next. We plan to continue with Helping Hands, but the future is going to look different. And maybe that's where you come in. Our season is more sparse now. We just can't go as often. Perhaps you have time. Perhaps you would like to pour into and gain friends like we did at Helping Hands. So one thing we've learned over the last year is that even though everything changed for us, God never changes. So that leads me to the last part of my story. This is my favorite part of the story, but God. So despite how hard this past year has been, God has shown up big time. God has started answering our prayers before we even knew what to pray. Before the words even came out of our mouths, God started answering our prayers. He answered our prayers before we even went to the emergency room. One of the first things the doctors asked us when we arrived that day is, how many seizures has Corey had? None. They were dumbfounded. The answer is none. Before we even knew that there was a problem, God was already protecting Corey. He drove until the day before we went to the hospital, never had a seizure, but God. When Corey came out of surgery, this neurosurgeon met with me before I went up to see him in recovery. And the neurosurgeon told me all of the things that could or should or would possibly happen when Corey came out of surgery. He might possibly have lost use of his entire right side. He may have right side weakness in his arm or leg. He could possibly use a cane, possibly a walker, maybe for a while, maybe forever. The doctor told me his face might droop due to stroke-like symptoms, and he probably has no right peripheral vision. Only one out of that list we've actually dealt with. Corey's lost his right peripheral vision, but he has gained all of his strength back, and most of it he had following surgery. But God. Most with a glioblastoma diagnosis don't go back to work. On October 7th, Corey went back to work. Not only went back to work, but he went back to work at the same place where he previously worked before. But God. We've got a stack of papers at home about this thick. Our binder is overflowing with all the paperwork, including all the bills that we've received. All of our medical bills are paid. This community's been so generous, and God has intervened in miraculous ways. But God. There's so many more but God moments I could share, but we would have to be here all night. These weren't just isolated things, guys. This was God reaching down into our lives and letting us know we weren't alone. He was already building restoration into our story before we even realized. So I couldn't end the evening without show and tell. After all, I am a teacher. I have a friend who's a potter, and when he learned of our diagnosis, he knows my husband and wanted to do something special, so he created a special mug just for Corey. Then a friend of ours was supposed to deliver the mug to me at school. On the day that she was to deliver it, she sat the bag down that it was in, didn't do anything wrong, but just the way she happened to set it on the floor, the mug shattered. She fell to her knees and just cried her eyes out to God. Why did this have to break? This is for Corey of all people. You know, God, why did you allow this to happen? Her son saw her crying and wanted to fix the situation and said, Mom, maybe we can fix the mug. He took the pieces from his mom and fixed the mug with duct tape or masking tape. I wrote some words on these broken pieces of pottery that just remind me of our year. Then one day, everything changed. No longer the caregiver. I have to learn to be a care receiver. But God. In the end, but God. The same day that the pottery broke, a clock fell off the wall at our house. The hands were bent, the clock mechanism didn't work anymore. This was a clock that Corey had special made. It said Ivins in it, established September 26, 1992. Guys, this was an ugly moment. I just put my hands on the countertop and cried out to God, please don't tell me that time is done for the Ivins family. I shared the situation with some friends later that day. As I shared with my friend, she reminded me, Shelly, God is in the business of putting the broken pieces back together. The woman who broke the pot accidentally, when she fell on her knees and was crying, God told her, but I'm in the business of putting the broken pieces back together. Both women told me the exact same thing on the same day. And it was just like God was speaking to me. I'm in the business of restoration. Let me show you the pot, the original mug. The original mug was just for Corey. One thing that God's taught us this year is that when he puts the pieces back together, they're not gonna look the same as they did before. Even when it's hard, even when nothing seems like it's falling into place, but God.
It's fascinating how in each of our lives, seasons are bound to change in ways that we never anticipated. But I appreciated Shelly's gentle but powerful reminder to hold on to two simple words, but God. Even when our capacity changes, even when our life changes, but God, he does not. As we close tonight, I want to come back to something that Shelly shared so beautifully. In life, there are seasons. seasons that we're able to pour out, to give care, to love, to show support. And there's times that we, in return, need to receive care. Neither season is wrong. Both are how God weaves his work through community and people. At Helping Hands, we see this every single day. Families that walk through our doors are navigating change, crisis, and uncertainty, and needing love, care, and support themselves. Our desire is to empower them, even to the point that they can pour into others themselves. And all along the way, we have volunteers stepping in to show them love, care, and support. If you're unfamiliar with Helping Hands, we're a local family resource center that serves men, women, and children through free programs and services. They range from OB medical services and maternal education to parenting education, community groups for both men and women, children's programming, couples coaching, material assistance, food assistance, and so much more. In 2025 alone, 177 volunteers invested over 2,300 hours of their time, resulting in over 3,000 hours spent building meaningful, lasting relationships with families that walk through our doors. Truly, this work would not be possible without our wonderful volunteers that often show up quietly and faithfully. So if something stirred in you tonight and you find yourself in a season where you have time, care, or friendship to give, I encourage you to prayerfully consider, where is God calling you? Maybe it's Helping Hands, maybe it's somewhere else, but God will make his invitation clear. And when we respond, lives are strengthened, often in ways that we may never fully see. And if you're in a season where you don't have time or capacity to volunteer, there are other meaningful ways that you can step in. Helping Hands is always in need of material donations for the Helping Hands store. Things like diapers, wipes, gas cards, grocery cards for families, food items, those all go a long way in making a difference in our families' lives. We also invite you to consider partnering with Helping Hands financially. We have the goal to raise $10,000 through this event, and we would be humbled if you chose to be a part of the impact happening right here in our community. As you leave tonight, we invite you to take a response card home and prayerfully consider where God is calling you and equipping you to step in. On that card, you can indicate if you have interest in being a volunteer or being a part of a group that we reach out to when we have material donations. You can also indicate if you have interest in partnering with us financially. All make a difference, all are meaningful. We thank you for being here tonight, for being a part of a community that shows up, that cares. May God bless you. We'd like to give a big thanks to our event sponsor, Patty Troxel, and our video sponsor, Renovate Counseling Services. Thank you for your support in helping make this event possible.